Chapter 15, Into the Unknown. The trio stepped cautiously into the dimly lit tunnel, their footsteps echoing softly against the smooth metal floor. The walls around them were sleek and metallic, strange glowing panels embedded at intervals, casting an eerie blue hue across the futuristic corridors. Unlike anything they had seen before, the passageway stretched out in a labyrinthine maze, each turn revealing automatic sliding doors, reinforced bulkheads, and transparent glass windows opening into sterile, lifeless rooms. Maddogg ran a calloused hand over the cool metal wall, his brow furrowed. "This ain't right," he muttered. "Who built all this?" Azmadan studied the strange symbols etched onto the nearby doors, running a hand along the smooth surface. "Not just built it," he murmured. "This place has been abandoned for a long time." Nathaniel exhaled slowly, gripping his sword. "Then why does it feel like we're being watched?" A flickering screen embedded in the wall caught their attention, lines of indecipherable text scrolling across before fading into static. A mechanical hiss echoed ahead as one of the sliding doors half opened and jammed, sparking lightly before stopping halfway. The air inside carried a stale, antiseptic scent. Beyond the threshold lay what appeared to be a hospital ward, rows of metal-framed beds, medical equipment long since rusted or broken. A few monitors still blinked weakly, the remnants of power barely keeping them alive. Maddogg wrinkled his nose. "I don't like this place." Nathaniel moved toward one of the beds, brushing dust from a clipboard still hanging from the end. The writing had faded, but beneath layers of grime, strange anatomical diagrams lay scrawled across yellowed pages. Whoever was here, they were studying something. Azmadan adjusted his coat, casting a wary glance down the corridors ahead. And whatever they were studying, we'd best hope it's long gone. Further down the maze of corridors, Maddogg pushed open a half-ajar door, revealing a darkened room filled with movement. The sound of gnawing and scratching filled the stale air. As the dim light filtered inside, dozens of rats scattered across the floor, their teeth buried in the remains of some long-forgotten carcass. The bones were stripped nearly bare, save for patches of rotting flesh clinging stubbornly to the frame. Maddogg gritted his teeth. "Rats! I hate rats." Without hesitation, he swung his great axe, the blade cleaving straight through one of the rodents. Its broken body hit the floor with a wet thud, but as the echoes of his strike faded, the room fell into an unnatural silence. Every rat stopped eating. Every beady red eye turned toward him. Nathaniel barely had time to call out before the swarm surged forward. Maddogg swung his axe in wide arcs, cleaving through two, then three of the vermin, but they moved unnaturally fast. Sharp claws latched onto his arms, his legs, razor-like teeth sinking into his flesh. He roared in pain, throwing them off, but there were too many. A mass of writhing bodies toppled him to the ground, rats crawling up his chest, biting, clawing. His axe slipped from his grasp as his vision swam, the gnashing swarm overwhelming him. For the first time in years, Maddogg felt himself slipping. Nathaniel was already running toward the door, holy energy crackling along his blade. "Hold on," he bellowed, swinging with righteous fury. The first rat exploded into light, its body incinerated by divine force. Nathaniel stepped into the fray, his sword flashing in brilliant arcs, each stroke leaving behind a trail of burning fur and smoldering corpses. The swarm hissed and shrieked, but one by one, they fell beneath his smites. Azmadan stood at the threshold, hands raised, tendrils of dark energy coiling in his palms, ready to strike, but the battle was over before he could unleash his magic. The last rat twitched, then collapsed, its body smoldering from Nathaniel's final strike. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees beside Maddogg, placing a hand over the barbarian's chest. His palm glowed with divine radiance, the energy sinking into Maddogg's battered form. The wound stitched together, bruises fading, breath returning. Maddogg gasped, eyes flying open. He groaned, pushing himself up on his elbows. "I hate rats." Azmadan smirked. "You made that quite clear." Nathaniel helped him up, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You good?" Maddogg grunted, rolling his shoulder as he pulled a small vial from his belt. He uncorked the health potion, downing the bitter liquid before wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I will be." The trio pressed on, Maddogg nursing his wounds but determined to move forward. The deeper they traveled, the more alien the corridors became. The once pristine walls now showed deep claw marks, scorch marks from unknown battles. Some doors were sealed shut, while others flickered open and closed sporadically, sensors struggling to function after years of abandonment. The air grew colder, the oppressive silence weighing heavier with every step. Azmadan ran a hand over the wall, his fingers tracing the indentations. This place wasn't just abandoned. He turned to the others, his golden eyes burning in the dim light. Something else happened here. Nathaniel exhaled, gripping his sword tighter. Then we should be ready for whatever's next. Maddogg cracked his knuckles. As long as it ain't rats, I'm good. With that, they pressed deeper into the labyrinth, their footsteps swallowed by the suffocating quiet. The air grew colder as the trio made their way deeper into the metal corridors. The once sterile environment of polished steel and glass began to shift, the walls now scuffed and dented, signs of occupation more recent than the rest of the abandoned facility. Ahead, a stairwell descended into darkness, the flickering lights from the panels above barely reaching beyond the first few steps. A faint, musky scent drifted upward, a mixture of damp wood, sweat, and something distinctly earthy. Maddogg rolled his shoulders, flexing his fingers. "Anyone else getting the feeling we ain't alone down here?" Azmadan smirked, his glowing golden eyes peering down into the shadows. "Oh, we're definitely not alone." Nathaniel exhaled, adjusting his grip on his sword. "Then let's be ready." With that, they descended. The stairwell spiraled downward, the walls more rusted, more corroded, as if this section of the facility had long been left to rot. But soon, another sight greeted them: wooden barricades, hastily constructed with modern planks, nailed and reinforced as if to fortify the area from intrusion. Unlike the sleek, metallic surroundings, these looked handcrafted, recent. Maddogg stepped forward, pressing a hand against the wooden beams. "Someone's been living here." Azmadan ran a hand over the crude craftsmanship, his brow furrowing. "Not just living here. Defending it." Nathaniel stepped back, raising his sword. "Then I suppose knocking isn't an option?" Maddogg grinned. "I prefer my way." With a mighty swing of his great axe, the barricade splintered apart. Wood cracked and snapped, sending debris scattering across the corridor. The sound echoed through the tunnels, and as the dust settled, a new scent filled the air: burning torches, damp fur, and something vaguely sour. A sound followed. Chattering. Sharp, high-pitched voices. Movement. Then, the unmistakable creak of boughs being drawn. From the shadows of the broken barricade, glowing yellow eyes peered through the gloom. Maddogg barely had time to react before a volley of crude arrows whizzed through the air. He twisted, one shaft glancing off his shoulder armor, another embedding itself in the ground near his feet. "Goblins!" Nathaniel barked, raising his shield just as another volley of arrows rained down. Azmadan flung out a hand, dark tendrils of energy coiling around his fingers as a blast of eldritch force erupted, striking the closest goblin square in the chest and sending it flying backward with a shriek. Maddogg, growling, rushed forward, but the goblins were nimble, scattering into side tunnels like rats, disappearing behind overturned furniture and makeshift barricades deeper in the corridor. Nathaniel charged after them, his sword glowing with divine light, swinging into the first goblin he reached, the creature barely raising its jagged dagger before the blade sliced through its defenses. More goblins swarmed from the tunnels, their crude weapons clanging against Nathaniel's armor as they tried to overwhelm him. One leapt onto his back, stabbing at his shoulder. "Get it off," he shouted. Maddogg grabbed the goblin, ripping it away and hurling it into a nearby wall with a sickening crash. "Pests," he snarled. Azmadan, watching the chaos unfold, raised both hands, summoning a burst of fire that exploded across the tunnel, sending several goblins screaming and scattering as flames engulfed their hiding spots. One goblin lunged from the smoke, a rusted spear aimed for Azmadan's chest, only for the warlock to sidestep smoothly, extending a hand. The goblin froze mid-air, dark energy crackling around its form. Azmadan clenched his fist, and the creature crumpled to the floor. Nathaniel drove his sword into the last standing goblin, its screech echoing before falling silent. The corridor was still. The fight was over. Maddogg exhaled, rolling his shoulder. "You know, I think I might hate goblins more than rats." Nathaniel wiped his blade, glancing toward the deeper corridors. "That was just a scouting party. There are more." Azmadan dusted off his coat, stepping over a fallen goblin. "Then we'd better keep moving." The trio pressed on, moving deeper into what was now clearly an inhabited goblin settlement. The crude barricades gave way to tunnels lined with stolen furniture, scraps of cloth repurposed as makeshift banners hanging from walls. Old wooden crates were stacked in corners, filled with rusted weapons, stolen trinkets, and crude carvings resembling monstrous faces. Nathaniel held up a hand. "We need to move quietly." Maddogg scoffed, but nodded, rolling his shoulders before lowering his stance. Azmadan's eyes gleamed as he whispered, "Leave this to me." With a flick of his wrist, dark energy coiled around them, weaving shadows over their forms. The trio vanished into the darkness, their footsteps silent as they crept through the goblin tunnels. Up ahead, goblin voices chattered. Two sentries, sitting atop an overturned cart, gnawed on old bones, their weapons leaned lazily against a nearby barrel. Maddogg grinned. "We taking them quiet, or the fun way?" Nathaniel gave him a look. "The quiet way." Azmadan smirked. "Watch and learn." With a flick of his hand, a spectral shadow curled toward the goblins, whispering unintelligible voices into their ears. The goblins shuddered, their eyes darting around in panic. One stood up, gripping its weapon tightly. "You hear that?" The other nodded rapidly, backing away. "Bad place. Bad place. We go now." Before Maddogg could blink, the goblins turned and ran down a side passage, vanishing into the tunnels. Nathaniel exhaled. "Well, that worked." Azmadan dusted off his hands. "Did you expect anything less?" Maddogg scowled. "Still wanted to smash something." Nathaniel chuckled. Ahead, the tunnels opened into a larger chamber, torchlight flickering against the walls. The sound of chanting, low, guttural, rhythmic, echoed through the space. Azmadan narrowed his eyes. "I think we've just found the heart of this enclave." Maddogg cracked his knuckles. "Then let's tear it out."